Welcome to Parallax. Parallax, the construction amidst eternal decay. Parallax, the portal to the edge of chaos. Parallax, poem and provocation.
So hello, welcome Luke.
Thank you, Andrew.
Luke is our resident Gurdjieff expert, student of the Fourth Way. Also wrote a book at Parallax on Gurdjieff and Christianity. The thesis being sort of that Gurdjieff is um, let's say, a Christian above all mystic. And today he proposed that he wanted to talk to us at the Parallax about some of his recent ideas about, as far as I understand, Gurdjieff and sort of electricity, the spiritual ecology of the cosmos. You wrote a recent blog on that, and how I guess it's a question of living in a time of attention capture and intense, um, being plugged in, and how do we work on our attention in uh, this particular climate with the internet, etc. Many people would just go and live in the forest and do fourth way stuff, but you are working with technology and internet, and one of the few people who are sort of like engaged in that area. So anyway, that's a long introduction. Am I on the right track, Luke?
Yeah, no, it is. It's been a little bit of an interesting journey, and one of the reasons I sort of reached out to you and Tom to get some thoughts was from Tom's book, of course, which is all about the will and willpower, and he's been writing some very interesting articles around it. And probably roughly around about the same time, I started to sort of revisit one of the chapters in Gurdjieff's book, in Bub's Tales to his grandson. And there was a very interesting chapter there. And it was this notion that Gurdjieff had proposed that our extraction of electrical energy recently in human history is potentially leading to a shortening of our life, but also more importantly, a willlessness that is and will have an impact on our capacity to transform. So all of this, the spiritual path, the spiritual search. And so there's this very interesting sort of interplay, this ecology, this electrical ecology that he talks about, which of course we don't normally think of electrical sort of energy, and which is essentially light, which is all around us, anywhere near what we think, for example, when we extract minerals from the earth, or we extract any other resource, which we all understand is kind of limited. And so we have to be very, very careful with the ecology and the whole web of life and our the planet. And so when we think of electrical energy, when we think of light, often we think of it that it's, kind of infinite, abundant. And he's saying, well, maybe it's not. And this electrical energy, this light, which is essentially we are electrical beings, every key process in us from our the neurological pathways in our brains, all the way down to very key kind of chemical interactions that we have are mediated by electrical sort of energy. So we're very much immersed in this ecology of electrical energy. And he was saying in his book, in his normal storytelling ways, that by extracting this in a very artificial way, that we also somehow take something away from ourselves if we're not careful. And so this really sort of begged a question. Okay, this notion of that if we're extracting electrical energy and we're part of this electrical ecology here on Earth, and indeed as part of the entire cosmos, then what does this notion of will have in relation to it?
It's
So anyone that,
interesting. Sorry, I'm
sorry,
just
Andrew.
thinking that it's interesting just pointing out how, again, Gurdjieff is so far ahead of his time.
Yeah.
That might not have been an obvious point back when he was writing, but it's almost in the nuclear age, it's almost obvious. We have as a major symbol of the monster of a time the zombie and the zombification of people's minds and
Mhm.
the zombification of culture, through intense screen addiction and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I just wanted to make that kind of point that this is not, it doesn't seem as esoteric a perspective as it might have in Gurdjieff's time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, he died in 1949 and did most of his writing much earlier than that. So power lines were just like a new thing, let alone the tech that might sort of be fueled by it. But of course, yes, you're right now. The last 30 to 40 years, there's just been this explosion, and all of our technology is fueled by all of this energy, and it needs to come from somewhere. And so his foresight around this, so clearly he was very sensitive to something. Maybe when, because he came from the Caucasus region and coming into the major towns and also the major sort of areas around Europe and America, he was probably very much affected by what he was seeing, probably also by what he was feeling. And he talks about this through this chapter into his books. And so, being in the tech field myself, where now we're just constantly immersed in everything, we're constantly being radiated. Even you and me right now, there's lights on, we have a screen, and there's light coming at us left, right, and centre, which we know affects us in very intimate ways. And we're constantly in this environment. When we jump in a car, when we're in a building next to power lines, it doesn't matter where we are constantly being affected by this energy in some way, shape, or form. And many people have written books, and there's lots of clinical research about it. So I'm not saying anything new, but it's interesting that in all of the research, at least that sort of I've done, this electrical energy is not so much treated as a finite resource. But for him it was. So everything we extract out of nature, every part of this electrical energy, then there's a price to be paid. And
Mm.
that price, as beings like us, potentially could be a high one. So these two consequences that he talks about, living in this age where all this electrical energy is literally being ripped out of nature and funneled sort of elsewhere into the big machine, is around shortening life and willlessness. So we can probably get a little bit of a sense of the shortening of life with radiations and all of those sorts of things, and cancer and ill health. But I was just reflecting on Tom's book and this notion of willlessness, that this energy, since it's such an intimate part of us and part of our organism, we are, as I said, an electric being, really then just brings into question what is will? Where does it come from? And then how does it express itself through us? And potentially, why could there be this willnessness that Gurdjieff talks about
Mm.
as we artificially extract all of this energy, which we are now so accustomed to, we don't even know that it's all around us, very much like a fish in the ocean asking, where is the water?
Mm. Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts as you're speaking. I've been thinking about shamanism a little bit and the fact that one of the things perhaps we've lost in the modern world is the law of reciprocity. In other words, you take something, you give something back, etc., which seems embedded in all of the traditional cultures. And the
Mm.
shaman's sort of task was to restore that when it, got out of whack. Um, so I think in a way of Gurdjieff as a kind of being attuned to that and being a modern sort of
Mm.
shaman in that way.
Yeah.
Um, and also he does talk about reciprocity. So I think we're an extractive culture and we've forgotten about reciprocity. And then we try to solve that, but through sort of technocratic means, recycling, and we're obsessed with this sort of figuring that out on a very technical level.
Yeah,
But something needs to be figured out on a spiritual level.
yeah, yeah. And he talks about this ecology as not homogeneous. So these energies can be concentrated around a certain area, which indeed they are around the cities. And these energies can help to be like, if you like a carrier wave for consciousness. And so, like the shaman and like many other practices in the past, they're trying to, in a sense, either even things out or help to consciously direct the energy from a place of high concentration to a place of lower concentration to either ameliorate consequences, such as wars,
Yeah.
or to refunnel things in such a way that it might help with a certain form of spiritual work. And so to think about it like that is very, very different rather than we just receive all of this light from the sun, which only really hits half of our planet while the other half is dark. But also we have all this electrical energy moving around and it's not homogeneous. It will be concentrated. There will be sort of lumpy bits spread throughout the earth. So, in a sense, he's sort of saying there that this energy, this extraction, and our use of it really needs to be thought in a much more a much more different way. As you were saying, that this energy is a resource that we need to be very careful with and not exploit. Otherwise, it will come back to bite us. And as I
Yeah.
said, one of those things he talks about is willlessness. So that
Is what?
becomes
Sorry, what was the word used?
willlessness.
Willness. Yeah,
We lack
lacking
we
in the
lack
will.
will.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lack will. We lack willpower. And when you look in the world, and also when you look at his teachings, as well as many other kind of religious practices, one of the pertinent skills or kind of properties or the faculty that we need to acquire or grow is this application of will or willpower in order to do anything, whether it's through a discipline or some type of training. So Gurdjieff there is saying, well, if we're extracting all of this energy, this light from the environment and funneling it into machines, something something comes out of us because something needs to be replaced. And so we're the
Mm.
next sort of, if you like, rung on the food chain, whereby the electric nature of our being is a battery source. And I can't help thinking
Yeah.
of
Matrix.
the
Mhm.
Matrix movies,
Yeah, of
that
course.
in that sense. So we're either being fed energy or energy is being extracted from us.
So the food that we're feeding something, right? Or I mean, we have to be feeding and being fed at the same time, right? It seems, rather
Yeah,
than just, it seems we're overstimulated, overstressed. Oh, our nervous system is sort of working overtime to digest all of this, electricity or just intensity. And you can feel that, sometimes I have a sort of a Sabbath day where I turn off internet and television and everything,
yeah,
and just be with my family. And you feel something is like, and then it makes you realize how much low level, invisible, almost invisible stress that the organism is accumulating or working under in these conditions.
yeah, yeah. And all of that stress creates a great deal of energy that then has to go somewhere. So, in a sense, there's a lot coming out of us, if you like. Gurdjieff talks about um, leaking, that
Yeah.
there is once, when we're anxious, when we're stressed, there is a lot of energy that sort of naturally comes out of us. And of course, the most pertinent form of that energy is electrical because of the nervous system that we have.
Yeah.
So we're irradiating the environment, if you'd like, with all of our stress and
Hmm.
anxiety. And in a sense, that's one way of feeding the environment. and trying to maintain this equilibrium. So then the other question is, well, then how can we be really fed so that there is an energy moving into us rather than being extracted from us?
So, yeah, the only answer that I've ever come up with is in some way is spiritual practice, which isn't an end in itself, but it seems to be the only way we can deal with that properly.
Yeah.
From my point of view, and I was in the park the other day and I was watching everybody kind of like, there's so many people doing sports now. They're running around the park, right? Like in Paris, it's just there's hundreds of people. They're just running up and down the Seine. There's new. So I think that's the stress of electric life, kind of finding a form, and they're running, which keeps them healthy enough to function and live in this rather strange world.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that solves the deeper problem. That's my thought.
Well, I think it might be a bit of a band-aid. There's a lot of
Yeah.
energy that needs to come out and be ameliorated in some way, shape, or form. But the deeper question is there. Something is being extracted from me. And indeed, this is the Gurdjieff's concept of sleep, is that we don't have the appropriate quality of energy to function in a more awake state. That there's all this energy being extracted from us. And if we could just contain that and not let it leak out and escape, then we might accumulate a certain quality of energy in us that could be used for our spiritual work. So this idea of electrical energy, well, at least it being extracted artificially, is somehow interrupting that process in a detrimental way, then has some quite serious implications because, in a sense, the internet is like the Matrix movies, feeding off of us,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
And so how do one reverse that? And I think you've alluded to it, that there must be some kind of practice which allows me, while I'm trying to interact with all of this technology, that allows me to be fed and nourished, or at least allows me to contain a certain quality of energy rather than it being extracted from me.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way, how's this for a thought that we're living in the best of times and the worst of times simultaneously,
Yeah,
because it is kind of an opportunity in a way. It's something terrible, but it's also a kind of an opportunity.
yeah. Well, that's how most, at least my experience, most opportunities are. They're two-edged swords. They're a wonderful dream and a hellish nightmare. It all depends how you approach it and use it.
Exactly.
And technology is the same. It's like with AI, it can be quite a useful servant for humankind and also very quickly become something other. And that's the way it has always been. It's how we approach it and how we use it. And I
Hmm.
think what Gurdjieff was trying to say here is that this this tech that we've stumbled across and are now using en masse, that maybe we need to think again. Not to say that we shouldn't use it, not to say that we shouldn't have the internet and all of this data and kind of digital world,
Well, it's out
but
of
just
it's there. You can't
it's
make it go away. It's
you
once it's
can't put
there.
the genie back into the
No.
bottle. But it is worth okay, maybe, and I don't think we can even press pause, but we can at least maybe look at approaching it in a different way. And so this becomes, I think, a very an interesting idea that was seeded by Gurdjieff almost 100 years ago now. Which again, coming back to your point, the foresight there was, I think, a bit of a miracle.
Yeah. So approaching it in a different way. So maybe you want to elaborate on that. How do we approach it in a different way? I mean, I know we need to be conscious. That's the first thing because this technology is too strong. It's just going to overwhelm us and turn us into all kinds of things, make us
Yeah,
ideologically possessed, It's going to do all, or just put us, as you say, put us to sleep, turn us into consumer zombies. So how do we consciously, I find it impossible actually to consciously not be hijacked if I'm using the machines, If I'm on the machines and using them, I find it at my level of attention and intelligence, and I'm sure there's other people who are able to, you know, but there's always a hijacking process going on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think maybe the first step is being aware that I will be hijacked. That's what's going to happen. And so that a different approach is maybe coming to trying to come to this in a religious sense that the space and the tech that we have really needs to be consecrated in a way. That I know that in engaging with this stuff, that there is something that can put me to sleep very, very quickly, something that might drain me, extract something from me. And even that awareness by itself can just help maybe to just pull back a little bit and work with some practices. One of them is to try to increase the quality and the strength of one's attention. But even with that, though, it will be quite a struggle. But by being able to ground oneself into the body, being able to try to be as present as one possibly can for as long as one possibly can, at least gives a chance that I won't be as consumed by it or as kind of taken away by it. So it can be a very good reminding factor, if you'd like, to work, to do some kind of inner work, some kind of spiritual practice that just leaves something a little bit inside rather than it being all sucked in through the screen or on my keyboard or on my mouse. But that's incredibly difficult, as you said, incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it seems incredibly difficult. At the same time, it's a powerful energy that can be used.
Yeah,
Maybe you could give your insights about AI a little bit because, um, you know, AI is going to write an email for you and, do all these things, make all these processes very simple, easy, so you don't have to have your attention on certain things that you might have to have your attention on before, like spelling, grammar, whatever, all kinds of things that. Um, Again, it's sort of mind blowing, and we're in early stages of what this technology is going to be and what it's going to do to us. Uh,
yeah,
how does AI, what can Gurdjieff help us with in terms of AI? Because it seems like an externalized unconscious mind or something that is, out there on the internet. And that's bizarre. And I don't know what's going on and what it is. So
yeah. Well,
it is like a god of some kind or a demigod or a,
yeah. Well, I think people would like, like with the golden calf, are trying to make AI into something that it's not. At the end of the day, it won't be conscious. It is just a whole series of processes and protocols and algorithms.
yeah, yeah.
the the level of calculation might be so fast and so complex that we can't wrap our puny little brains around, which is fine. But at the end of the day, it's just an algorithm.
Yeah.
And so one of the
But is it going to make us incredibly stupid?
well,
Because
it
of how
could
easy it
again,
makes these things that we used to have to put in effort in and into, right? Like the work. Gurdjieff talks about the work, you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it just changes the nature of work. I mean, the thing I like about AI is that it can really do most of the legwork for me. It takes out quite a lot of the admin burden, if
Yeah,
you'd like.
totally. Me too.
And so I got, I only have a certain amount of time, and do I really want to spend most of that doing mundane, trivial admin that a monkey could do? No. I
Yeah,
would probably rather get AI to do that because it can do it faster and better and
totally.
more accurate. So there's those sorts of tasks. And the more that we just understand that that's what it can do and it can do well, but it will need our guidance because any AI program is only as good as what you input into it. So you input shit, then expect shit to come out of it.
But
And
most of everything is shit. So most of what's there is probably shit, right? Because
well, it
it's all
depends.
the information that is, in the world today,
Wh-
and most of it is noise, right? And then,
Which is true, but I've found myself interestingly as I've used more and more AI, wanting to learn about it, but also using it in my business and a
yeah,
range of other things, is that I'm now much more careful in how I instruct it or prompt it, and
totally.
also what I feed it. The mistake
Mm,
that people make is asking these open-ended questions and then just go out and search. And of course, it'll only search much of what the noise is. It's very hard to filter all of those things. So in a way, I need to sort of know what I want or what I think the result will be with a bit of a sense test, and then make sure that all of the inputs are appropriate, making
yeah,
sure that I've got valid data, if you'd like.
yeah,
And then, more importantly, is asking the right questions.
right. So it can
And
be
this,
a practice of asking the right questions.
yeah,
That's
it's
very
the right
interesting.
questions. And I've found myself, for example, when I'm thinking about, kind of business clients or investors or those sorts of things, I've literally got to put myself in their shoes to make sure I'm asking the right questions that's going to meet their needs. So it all of a sudden starts to change how I think about how I use it. And
Yeah.
so rather than seeing AI as a bit of a genie in a bottle and you rub it and ask for a wish and hey presto, now we have to think very clearly, okay, this is just a big calculator. What do I want to feed into it so we can run all of these algorithms and potentially what might come out of it? And to have that sense, and then
Mm,
you reiterate. So I think there's a learning curve. There's AI kind of literacy, if you like,
totally.
around this. And I think that will take some time. But the question around all of this tech is just how we use it. And we can quite easily just allow it to run our lives. We've got AI agents now that can plug in and do all sorts of things for us. And there is a temptation for people just to allow AI to do everything. And for them, in a sense, to kind of play God, where they can just point a finger or ask one of the agents to do something, and hey, presto, it just happens. But that would be a mistake. And so we need to understand that this is a tool. And yes, it can get away from us, but at the end of the day, it's how we approach it, it's how we come to it.
Yeah.
A knife can cut bread or it can kill. It depends what we do. So I think there's a lot of education that's needed. And I
Hmm.
think that will take a long time. And unfortunately, we probably don't have that time because AI is evolving at such a pace that it's frightening. And I think that that's the frightening bit, that it's evolving so quickly that we can't keep up. Indeed, I don't think we can keep up now because there will be a whole AI world that will never understand or penetrate because it moves at speeds and is able to calculate things far more than any human mind or indeed a collective of human minds could ever do. So we've got this black box that's growing and growing and growing where we put something into it and something comes out of it and we have almost no idea of what happens in the middle.
Mm. What happens in the middle? Yeah. Um, well, I was thinking about also Gurdjieff had much to say about automatism, right?
Hmm.
Automatizing things. So you if you prepare things well, then you can do things kind of automatically if you have everything organized, and so you wake up in the morning and everything is in the right place, then you can get to work without thinking too much about where things are, and if you
Yeah.
don't, if you just leave a chaos, then things kind of go awry, and you know. So so and there's a just kind of automatization, right? Like our stomach
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
does stuff. We don't need to pay attention to it. And then there's the mechanical sleep death machine that, that Gurdjieff, which is automizing us into zombies. So I think both are happening at the same time. Would you agree or?
Yes, and for me, it really comes down to Gurdjieff's notion of the merciless hieropass, or time, that in a
Hmm.
very strange way over the modern era, and certainly since Gurdjieff's death, so the last sort of 80 years, is we're seeing this time compression where in past periods, things would take many, many years, hundreds of years even, to move 1 inch. Now that was kind of taking a couple of decades. Now it's years, now it's months, now it's days. With AI, something can turn very quickly in one moment. And so that becomes very interesting. And I think this is part of the anxiety around AI and how we approach it,
Yeah.
as well as all the other tech, is that every action or non-action that we take in the moment potentially has long-term consequences. And that's very, very different compared to yesteryear, where things take so long anyway that it won't matter if you get a few things wrong along the way because it will even itself out. Now, that's not the case. And this is something very, very interesting where one of Gurdjieff's students, Bennett, and he wrote a book back in 1966. And in that, one of the key things that he said that our perception of time would need to change because of the
Mhm.
confluence of all of these factors, economic factors, tech, all of these things will compress the human experience, where we will now need to look at things not how we used to, but that every action or non-action, because of just the sheer pace of what's happening, will have a long-term consequence. Now that's interesting for our consciousness and what we do, because what it calls for immediately
Mhm.
is that to have a presence of mind about what actions or non-actions we take requires a quite a deep level of awareness and being present in the moment.
Mhm.
So there's this interesting kind of demand that as the world speeds up, there is a demand on humans to slow right down. So
Yeah. Well,
these
that's
two
again,
opposite currents.
there's always this dialectic going on, it seems like everything gets super high sped up, and then the way to go is to go back to basics. Go back to the earth or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas when things get extremely artificial, then authenticity comes in, and so there's always seems to be this dialectic. I was thinking as you were talking about time, how maybe time is less linear than it used to be,
Mm.
in the sense that I was thinking of the music business because I play music. It's like when people discover something new now, it's usually something old. You know, they don't discover a new song, they discover an old song because music is sort of happening all at once. All the eras of music are recorded and they're there and they're so there isn't a linear story about music happening anymore. So the linear story of history and stuff breaks down. And that seems to be almost the illusion of modernity is this linearity. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't know if this is sort of a new thought for me. So because yeah, often we're looking for some kind of progress in linear time and evolution, and whereas the whole thing seems to be more in spirals and circles and going back and forth than it used to be, and then that's speeding up and it's almost dizzying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's like history is reaching a boiling point or a critical mass where
Yeah.
many of the things that we used to judge it by just break down. And so
Right.
this is a notion, I think that's throughout all of human thought, certainly in the Christian faith, that the parousia, the second coming, is essentially the whole world in this massive confluence of events that, if you like, overtakes history and turns it upside down and inside out. And really,
Mm.
probably for most people 20, 30 years ago, it was like, how everything, as you said, is going along in a linear tick-tock fashion. Oh, well, we do this, and now all of a sudden, with time compression, confluence, all of these things, politics, technology, economics, all seem to be compounding each other at this incredible rate. Something has to give, something changes once a critical mass is hit. And we just don't know what that is because we've never been there.
Yeah, how could we know? How could we have
Yeah.
predicted any of it? How could we have predicted the internet?
Oh, yeah, yeah. But yet there is this sense that all of these things at some point, all of this compounding, all of this involving, all of this stuff which is um, feeding on each other, there must come a turning point. There must come something where it either ignites a new event or it somehow changes how human history moves. And I think that feeling is growing more and more because we're feeling it. We're being hit with it every day, not just from an energetic point of view, as we've been kind of talking about, but an algorithmic point of view, all of our news feeds. Everything is hitting us, and there's this sense of if if this doesn't stop, if this keeps growing, where does it end? What reprieve do we have?
Yeah.
And this is probably one of the central tenets of Gurdjieff is that we need to wake up. There is something in us that needs to endure the stresses and strains of our times because they will be immense for all of
Yeah.
us, not just a group of people in either Roman times or, Genghis Khan times. It will be all of us. All of us will be in this one one boat, this one earth arc.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine about global warming, and he had all these catastrophic, uh, you know, uh, apocalyptic outcomes, which he thinks are unimaginably terrible. And I'm thinking, I don't feel that way necessarily. I think there probably is something terrible coming, but I also uh, that's not the whole story. I don't know how to
Mm.
explain that, but
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that's my sense of it.
yeah. No, I think for me too, there's this sense of this unknown, this big unknown. I mean, there's always uncertainty, but all of these confluencing factors is well, I just don't know. One always goes to doom and gloom and
Yeah, we go.
all
It's got
the
to be. It's
apocalyptic
global
movies.
warming. That's it. Like there's 100 other things that it could be, right? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
people could become obsessed with the one thing that's, the one apocalypse, and I almost think it's a psychological mechanism because we are all going to die and lose everyone we love, and that's just built into the nature of reality. So we tend to think that the world is the same, and it is the same, but. I just have a but, that's all.
yeah, yeah.
But I don't know how to
Well,
explain that but or that. Maybe it has to do with faith of some kind, but maybe that's
well,
not good enough for some people.
Yeah, and I think, well, that's, kind of like the essence of faith in a sense is you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst.
Hmm.
But if you're always dwelling on the worst, then that essentially that is what comes about. So there is this hope, and certainly for Gurdjieff, there is this hope. And in the Christian faith, there's this hope. Yes, we will go through trials and all of this stuff that's kind of coming in, but maybe in one sense it's needed in order to catalyze something else. What that is, anybody's guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just think that reality is absolute anyway at the same time. And in a way, that this is a question of will, right? I have like, it's
Yeah.
not like we have to become individual wills that are so powerful that we can become Superman in the Nietzschean sense. I don't think that's quite right.
Mm.
Part of it is right, part of it is true. Um, but but there's a way that fate and will are a singularity, or I don't know what I'm saying here, but I'm really on the edge of my understanding.
Well, I mean, I think it's yes, no, it's very interesting what you say. Gurdjieff did say that if there were 200 conscious people on Earth, then it would stop all wars, which is
Yeah.
a very interesting statement to make. But we know throughout all of history, certain brotherhoods and various sects kind of pop up in certain times and seed new ideas or practices, and all of that's very, very interesting, guided by this inner circle, guided by whatever. And so there's almost, in a sense, something here that this technology, particularly the internet that we have, which I call a fourth brain, is so vast and global, and all of us, if you'd like a brain cell within it,
Fourth
that
brain.
we do have a capacity if there are enough people who can become conscious of it and sensitive to it and have the will to endure it to
Yeah.
potentially redivert some of this energy to where it's needed. And the only time in history that that's been able to happen in a more concrete way is now because we have the internet. I'm in Australia, you're over in France, and yet, through all of our work that we've done over the last kind of couple of years, very clearly for me, there is an energy exchange that happens. It's
Yeah.
not just in one's head, it is a non-local thing, but yet it can occur through this odd medium. And this medium is electrical, like we are, at least in one sense. And we just don't understand that. But that does open up a possibility that if there's something happening between us, maybe a critical mass of people could help to subtly change the energetics of the internet in such a way as it might ameliorate some of these risks and consequences.
Mm. Is that working directly with the internet? I mean, you kind of put your finger on where I have the hope, let's say, if I have hope, and that's those 200 people. That's where the hope is for me, not in any mass movement.
Yeah,
On the other hand, a bunch of guys in some backwards town in Galilee or whatever can cause huge amounts of change, or you know,
yeah,
or wherever, if we talk about the great teachers of mankind, um, somehow they're the ones that actually move the clock forward
yeah,
on some level, even if the people don't even know that that's what's happening. That's where I see. That's why I'm not hopeless or nihilistic about the world.
yeah. No,
But then you said it has to do with the internet, and the electric age, and but is it the 200 individual people and their followers and whatever effect they have on the world? That's where the hope is.
well, I don't know, but I think what it
Yeah,
sings to me is that a small group of people, even one person,
yeah,
can change the course of history. And that very much comes down to willpower, comes down to the mission that they're on. But it always requires a small group at the very least to incubate something and
yeah.
to help just shift the dial just a little. And then it can create a movement of its own. But the masses, I have no hope in. The masses will always just do what the masses always do and follow the big current. which is
Yeah,
generally a current that moves down,
exactly.
where
Yeah.
this current that needs to sort of move up a little, vibrate with greater quality, but also it needs to be moved around the world in an efficient way. And there are many ways in which that could happen, but at least in a tangible sense, we have this technology that allows us to distribute this energy in far more efficient and tangible ways than we ever have. So I don't think as a species we've come to grips in any way, shape, or form with the internet or with AI. We have a long way to go.
Oh
And
yeah.
so we're like a toddler with a gun. We just don't know what we've got until it goes bang. So we need to grow up very, very quickly and look at this tech that we've evolved at such a rapid pace and maybe just think about it a little, that this is affecting us on many different levels, not just the algorithmic, the energetic, the economic, the political. And as always, the problem or the issue is with humans, but also the solution lays with humans. And I think this is where this hope comes in, that me, and you, and whoever else, if I can be tuned into an intention, which is a reflection of will, if I can develop my attention, which is a reflection of will, and imbibe that in my being, in my body, that I can become a natural conduit for the redirection of these energies by just trying to bring a presence and a sacredness to what I do.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I just react, I'm automatic,
Yeah.
and I will just be drained like most people are. We'll become addicted because we'll be looking for the next hit and high because that's where it stays for us. So this is a very interesting period of time where we've got this, I think, wonderful tech that we've built, which can be used in a way to help elevate and transform us on a whole, but it can also go the other way. And this comes down to what I alluded to earlier about this time compression, that perhaps we need to come to the precipice. Perhaps all of us need to see we're all in the same boat. And if we don't find ways with which to support this energy that is either driving us or draining us, then we die either a slow death or a horrible one,
Yeah. Like dogs. Yeah.
like dogs.
Yeah. So yeah, so it is, I guess it is a powerful um wake up call that is needed on some level.
Yeah. And it's a very tangible one. We're not talking about airy fairy, you know, the philosophers getting involved in with all their convoluted language. This is the energy that we are using every day that affects us every day. It has tangible, practical implications for us.
Yeah.
And so that then requires a practical approach and a practical look. How do we use it? How do we come to it? How does it affect us?
Yeah.
We talk about screen time, and you talked about needing to unplug for a day,
Yeah.
which, I do too. But why? Why do we need
Yeah.
that? Why do we need that?
Well, we need that because we're not free if we don't have it. I mean, we have no freedom at all. You know, personally, I've noticed, like, just a personal example, like, that I have to actually renounce certain activities,
Hmm.
behaviors that I would like to do in the moment. Quite a lot, actually, and more. I have to say, no, I'm not going to, watch a Netflix series, whatever. I have to very clearly set boundaries for myself
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm just, yeah, I'm just that dog, running after the bone all the time. I think Gurdjieff talked about the dogs as well. He had this,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the dogs
But
inside of us and how to tame those. We are this, we also have that sort of just, desire just to instantly, you know, embrace something quickly. And that tends to,
hmm,
so anyway, I think renunciation seems to be a big principle for me, especially when everything is available and easy and free and
yeah.
in face
Yeah.
and
But it seems to me that you understand why you need to renounce those things.
yeah,
And in a sense, because you've come to it through your own experience. It's like when you're young, you can go out and party and drink hard. Well, I'm 52. There's no way I can do that anymore. It's, because I've come to understand the limitations of my body, right?
yeah.
And so this is this interesting process, and I know that kind of governments around the world will look at trying to impose things. I know here in Australia they're trying to stop people under the age of 16 having a social media account, which is just crazy because there'll just be all these sort of arbitrary rules that everyone will just work around. But what's not being said is, well, maybe our children need to be educated, and what I have found, certainly
Yeah,
with my own children, is that they know far more about
yeah,
the
totally.
internet and its impacts on them than what I do. So there's a bit of arrogance that, maybe our kids who are natively digital, maybe we can learn something from them.
Yeah, well, I noticed my daughter reads a lot. She reads like a fish and she doesn't want to do all this Instagram stuff, because I think young people have we kind of, yeah, as you say, we're sort of condescending to young people,
Yeah,
but some of them are very easily, duped. And of course, youth is, and some people are, they're very sensitive. They can see things, that they can feel things very
yeah,
directly. And yeah, I think that's right. I think a bunch of laws and stuff is just, we're just gonna entangle ourselves more in a morass of puritanical kind of behaviorism. Whereas I guess the education again has to be a spiritual education
yeah,
on some
yeah.
level as
And
well. It can't be just the usual secular education that people are getting today. It seems to me that that doesn't lead anywhere. Um, Especially
no,
in my country, I don't think that leads anywhere. I think
yeah,
it's just circling around itself with all kinds
yeah.
of noble ideas, but lack of intrinsic um, ontological depth to the people who are promoting these politically correct ideas.
Yeah, yeah. No, the secular world is very good at circling the drain because it has nowhere else to go. But to look at these sorts of energies and the way that this technology has an impact on us really invites greater questions. Well, like, what is it about my being that is affected by these qualities? You know, am I maybe more than that? Am I, how do I become in touch with that? So the secular world doesn't like those sorts of things. It wants to steer away to the medical model, and it's just all about being functional and compliant, rather than about, well, potentially maybe there's a way to use this technology that could be transformative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's there and it's not going out, if it's not going back in the bottle, then yeah, I think that's the right direction.
Yeah, but I think it'll take a bit of a change in order to see that, and I certainly have that sense of a precipice coming.
Hmm. Okay. So anything else that you want to, do you feel this conversation is as full? Is there, do you want to, do you have any more salient points that you want to bring forth?
No, I think that's a good overview of some of the things that I thought might be helpful to at least raise. I'm sure there were far more wise minds that have thought much about this. I can't find it though. maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, so I'm hoping someone can correct me, but it sort of reopened my eyes again to reading that chapter from Gurdjieff, and just the foresight that he had, that I feel as though is only now becoming, at least for me, more and more apparent. And certainly my work online and working with others online, there is a very tangible medium here that has some very practical results. It's not just algorithmic, let's put it that way.